You said that you want my position on colonialism, and as you said, my ancestors actually suffered at the hands of it. Now I'm wondering, which colonialism are you talking about? Arab colonialism or British colonialism? I'm
It's
assuming
very
you would be.
different. We
You
can.
would be
You want me to talk
well,
and give you the
no,
difference
no,
about what?
no. Well,
I'll give.
we know one belongs.
Okay, so I had like an entire thing ready to just rattle off on this issue because I knew this is like standard stuff. Like these people are so predictable on the difference between Muslim conquest versus European colonialism. So I'll just mention some points for the benefit of you guys who are watching at this point, this 6 hour stream. But I want to give you some value out of listening to this. So let me go to the notes on this. A lot of these notes actually I had from before, because again, it's like the same thing, same arguments, same nonsense. Like you. Okay, so a very good article, academic article that you can read by Robert Hoyland. He's a professor at NYU, I believe, in New York. But he has this article, Were the Muslim Arab Conquerors of the 7th Century Middle East Colonialists? So his paper here is very interesting, and he compares and contrasts Muslim conquest versus in the 7th century versus modern colonialism. And he makes like a good argument and makes a lot of distinction. His conclusion is that no, these are not the same phenomenon. These are not the same thing. And he makes a lot of points. So here is his conclusion. I'll read the quote. In my opinion, this integrative dimension of the Muslim Arab conquests does make them different from the European colonial enterprise, because the homeland of the Europeans was so far away from their colonies, and because fewer Europeans relocated to them, the culture of the Europeans was relatively little affected by that of those they conquered. Mostly the influence was one way, with the Europeans inflicting substantial changes upon the indigenous cultures that they ruled. In the Muslim Arab case, the influence was two-way, with the conquered population participating in a very substantial way in the new Islamic civilization that emerged in the wake of the Muslim Arab conquests. So there's a lot that you can read between the lines in terms of what he's saying. What he's saying is very positive for Muslims, and I don't even think he has gone, even from a purely academic standpoint, he could have gone much further in distinguishing Islamic civilization or Islamic conquest versus European colonialism. But even what he says here is showing a very big distinction. He's saying that the new Islamic civilization that emerged, because as the Muslims are expanding and conquering, Islam spread in many ways. Okay, Islam spread in many ways. Part of the way that it spread was through trade and trade routes. Part of the way that it spread was through these kinds of merchants. Part of how it spread was through invitation, like different places were invited to become Muslim, and they saw the beauty of Islam, or for whatever reason they came into Islam. But part of it was also conquest. So Persia was conquered, Egypt was conquered, a lot of North Africa was conquered, parts of the subcontinent were conquered, and so forth. But the difference between European colonialism, Hoyland mentions some differences, but when Muslims expanded into an area, they improved that area, and they didn't keep the conquered people in a permanent state of racial subjugation. Like, okay, we conquered Persia, that means Persians are going to be second-class citizens to Arabs on the basis of race. They never had that policy, because some of the Muslim conquerors were Persian as well. Salman al-Farisi, he was one of the conquerors who conquered Persia. He was one of the mujahideen. So there was no racial element to it, and it meant that people could convert and become Muslim. They were incentivized to convert and to become Muslim, to accept the truth, right? they weren't necessarily forced, but they were encouraged, highly incentivized, which in reality, that's what coercion is. Coercion is not necessarily a knife on your throat or a gun to your head. Sometimes coercion is that you create a policy that makes it much better or easier to comply. That's also conversion. Like, let's be honest. Like, let's be very transparent and philosophically and conceptually consistent. Okay, that's important to us as Muslims. So yes, it was coercive for the truth. We want people to come into Islam, to adopt the Sharia, to stop, this kind of fornication, to stop any kind of extramarital activity, to stop hatred of the poor, to stop injustice against the poor, to inculcate these family values, all of these beautiful things in Islam, and most importantly, to stop idol worship, stop directing your worship to idols, to these pagan gods, and worship Allah alone, the creator of the universe. Leave these false religions, okay, and accept the truth. So we incentivize that. The Sharia incentivizes that. But as soon as you become Muslim, okay, then you have equal status with your conquerors. There's nothing like that in the pre-modern world. There's nothing like that in the modern world. When the US goes and bombs these countries and occupies these countries, they're in second class. The conquered people, the Iraqis, are second class citizens in their own country. What's the proof of this? US soldiers go around taking whatever they want, shooting whoever they want. And all of this has been documented. All of these war crimes have been documented. Every single one of these European colonial powers do these things. They just maintain their dominance, and they turn the places that they conquer into hellholes, into craters. That's what happens with European colonialism, or permanent slave class, permanent subjugated class. And they force these kinds of famines. And I had all of these stats that I wanted to share in the debate, but I didn't get to it. Okay, stats on colonial death. Like, this is just small sample. Modern Iraq war, estimates from 1 to 2 million deaths. 1 to 2 million people murdered in the past 17, 18 years. New York Times, the war on terror displaced 37 million Muslims, displacing them. Why are they displaced? Because you have created such a bad situation, such a living nightmare in these countries, that people have no choice but to leave. You think people like being refugees? You think people they enjoy having to leave the land of themselves and their forefathers and their ancestors? You think people like that? They want to come in boats to Europe? You think they want that? They want to be refugees? No, they're forced. Their lives were destroyed. Their countries were destroyed by this beautiful human rights world regime. Okay, 37 million Muslims displaced. With Muslim conquest, there are no refugees, historically. Okay, because the places that Muslims went became centers of civilization, centers of the Muslim civilization. Baghdad, Basra, Shiraz, Samarkand, Al-Qahira, Masr, Egypt, Cairo, Damascus, Al-Quds, Palestine, Damascus, Istanbul. All of these places were conquered. All of these places were conquered by Muslims, coercively. Did they become hellholes? Were they destroyed? Did they create millions upon millions of refugees? Were millions genocided? No. Contrast this with other civilizations in pre-modernity and modernity. Islamic civilization was morally superior to all of them. There's no comparison. Give me an analog of Baghdad. Give me an analog of Samarkand. Give me an analog of Cairo in the past 200 years of European colonialism. Go ahead. Where is the center of civilization that was created of Western civilization. No, and Robert Hoyland is pointing this out. It's like these European powers are ruling from afar. They just extract like this, vampire, extract all of the resources, destroy the lives of all these people. Okay, French occupation of Algeria, 8 million deaths. French occupation of Algeria, Belgian genocide of the Congolese, 1885 to 1908. 10 to 15 million people murdered by the enlightened European powers. Enlightened powers. British colonialism in the subcontinent. Estimates of 38 million. 38 million people. The forced famines. Go and Google forced famines. There's a Wikipedia article. Okay, 1943, Bangladesh, forced famine. 1.5 to 3 million people starved to death. This is your enlightened European West. Indian famine of 1899, 1 to 4.5 million estimated dead. Who is forcing these famines? They're secular Britain, enlightened Britain. This is not a Christian country anymore. This is enlightened, secular, democratic, human rights propounding Britain. Millions are being starved to death. Here, actually, I'll open the Wikipedia article since we're doing this. Yeah, 2 to 10 million, the Great Bengal Famine. 11 million, 0.8 million, 1837. 2 million, 1 million. Why can't we pin any of this on human rights and liberal democracy and freedom? Why? You want to talk about Arab conquests? Okay, well, let's talk about them. I'm not shy to talk about them, because when we talk about them, everyone can see the reality. Everyone can see what is really the more enlightened civilization. Who are the real human beings, and who are the monsters, the vampires, the tentacles across the world. Everyone can see.
Even more primitive society, and that brought slavery and sex slavery, whereas the other one brought other kind of suffering, but that didn't include slavery. So British didn't enslave people of India. So thank you very much. We know that. But yes, I'm not.
Yeah, we just starved them to death. We just starved millions of them. We didn't enslave them. We did kind of enslave them because they didn't own anything that they produced. We took it from them by force. So, but it's not slavery because we didn't use the word slavery. But putting that aside, we just force famined them.
Pro-slavery. I don't care about slavery. Yes, we condemn slavery. This was the cause of the suffering of an enormous amount of people, including my ancestors in India. So I don't understand why you put that on me as though, and you make an argument that, okay, they were going in the name of spreading enlightenment. The human rights. Yes, the Enlightenment started post-Renaissance period, and then 18th century. You could go into the Industrial Revolution time. You could go from anywhere. But it took nearly 200 years to filter down to where we are. Even the postmodernism was actually a result of the catastrophic First and Second World War, despite of.
See, you can't make this argument. He can't say that, oh, well, we're just trying to get it right. The Enlightenment started 200 to 250 years ago. It's been progressive. We've been trying to get it right. And so they were wrong. They were still advocating slavery, the early Enlightenment thinkers, but then eventually they realized that slavery is wrong, and then later women's rights came 100 years later, and then later another 100 years LGBT rights, the sexual revolution, now trans rights, drag queen story hour for children. That now we're getting it right. It just takes time. That's the kind of argument he wants to make to disassociate or distance himself from these atrocities. But again, you want to distance yourself from the atrocities, but you want to take all the credit. Because America wasn't built in the past 10 years. The British, the UK, France, Canada, Germany, Spain, they weren't built in the past 200 or the past 10 years. They were built over the past 250 years. And all of these genocidal policies are what led to where they are now in terms of this disproportionate wealth, where they control all of the world and they have all of the world's wealth and they terrorize the rest of the world by force and their nukes. So you have to take credit. Like, you can't propound the fruits of it without looking, and that's the analogy I made. Like, you want to show this sausage, this amazing delicious meal or steak, but you don't want to show how the cow was slaughtered. This is not fair. Like, this is not honest.
Having League of Nations, despite of having some understanding of enlightenment, and despite of propagating human rights, but that was still not working. But that is our argument. These things evolve over time, and we are consequently getting better and better and better with each. We used to say with each 100 years, or probably a millennia back in further back we go. But now it seems like we're getting better and better with each passing decade. Yes, you raised some good points about.
Yeah, things are getting so much better. Everything is so much better. The progress, look at like the way that I think of these liberals, like, what world are they living in? Like what world are they imagining themselves to be living in? Like, is this the world that they think that they're living in? Let me bring this. Like, is this, they think they're living in this utopia? Or this? Is this where they're living? Is this what they imagine the world to be like? What world are they living in? Because I'm living in this world. This is the world that I'm living in. This is when I go down the street in the city that I live in, is one of the major cities. This is the kind of stuff I see. This is the progress.
This gender change and all of that. Yes, these things are problematic. We know that, but again, no one is rolling over and but but that's overly simplification of human rights, because that's not all human rights says. The
pre-modernism, human rights says a big part of
what modernism is, which is scientific inquiry and reason. Using reason to come up with better solutions. That is modernism. And now this is when postmodernism, and not all postmodernism is bad either. This is
like, how are people coming up with better solutions? What's the evidence of that? That people have even the ability to figure out what's the right way to run society at a fundamental level. Yeah, you have like policies that any government is going to have policies on a very high level. But if the basis of society and the building blocks of society are corrupt, and the psychology of people has been corrupted, then what solution can you derive from that using human reason? Human reason is very limited. Like, we're like ants. We're like ants. We don't understand the bigger picture. Only God, only Allah, our Creator, knows and is able to guide us, to tell us this is the correct way to form your marriages, your families, your societies. These are the rules that you have to implement. You might not understand the rule and how it can be beneficial for you, but that's okay. Just like the ant is not going to understand the rules. And ants also they have instincts. All animals have these instincts, and Allah is the one who has given them those instincts so that they can make their colonies and protect the queen. And you have different roles. Different ants have different roles. Some of them are worker ants. Some of them are warrior ants. There are even ants that are just dedicated to guarding the entrance of the colony. Like, who has taught them that? Okay. If you are a pea-brain evolutionist, you'll say, oh, it was evolution. But enlightened people understand that that's impossible. It was God who created, Allah who has created the ant, the bee that dances. The bee is dancing with a certain kind of dance to inform the other bees where the honey is, or not the honey, where the flowers are, where the nectar is. With a dance. A bee. Who taught this bee? Who taught our bee bros how to dance in the right way to get that nectar? Subhanallah. Allahu Akbar. Allah is the one who is teaching them this. Allah is the one who has created them to do this. But does the bee know? Does the bee understand? We're like the same thing. We might not. We can just try with our finite intellect to grasp the wisdom of Allah, to grasp the wisdom of the Sharia. We try, like I try to do that. This part of pondering, tadabbur, tafakkur, on the ayat of Allah. I try with my tiny brain. I try to figure out what Allah, the beauty that Allah has revealed. I try, but ultimately, I'm like that ant. I'm like that bee. I'm not going to be able to grasp it, but I know my place. I'm a slave. I have to submit to my Creator. I have to worship my Creator. I have to be humble. I have to have that sense of awe, that reverence for my Lord. That's what I try to inculcate. Not this arrogant atheism. This arrogant, oh, we know everything and we'll figure it out. It's just going to be a matter of time. It's all going to be progress. This offensive, aggressive atheism, materialism, it's just so disgusting.
You can nitpick anything, just like I nitpick your slavery and sex slavery issue, wife beating, and then you try to make excuses. Unlike you, I am honest. Well, in some cases, maybe you are honest, but you're not entirely honest yet, even though they say you are the honest one. But we'll see. But I'm saying that there are some problems, and we know that these problems exist.
No, but the main problem is that you can't spread these values without total war. That's the whole point. So you have to say that that's necessary and that's justified. How are you going to get the people in Afghanistan to follow human rights? You're complaining constantly about Afghanistan. So how are those people going to accept human rights and democracy as you propose? I mean, the answer from the U.S. state is clear. They invaded and occupied for 20 years, brutal occupation. And now, even after they're gone, you have Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, saying we're going to agitate and we're going to pressure Afghanistan to start accepting LGBT rights and women's rights. And if they don't comply, we're going to, put the pressure on them. So this is all force, and it leads to suffering. You stand by all that or no? Answer.
I'll answer that to you, but
yes or no? You stand by it or no?
If you answer me,
it's an answer. You never answer.
If you answer that, do you support Taliban or not? You said brutal occupation. You could argue about the way the war on terror was started, but after that,
you could argue. All you need to say, man, is that I don't agree with the war on terror. I don't agree with all this occupation. I don't agree with millions dead. But he never says that. He never makes a clear statement about that. That speaks to his moral character and the values that he is proposing.
America was not there. There was no Governor General of America there.
There was no America in Afghanistan?
There was no government that was directly American. The government itself was Afghan. The government was Afghan. Yes, you could laugh at
they're Afghan. They weren't agents of. Look at all of the leaks that were posted by the Washington Post. They were agents. Afghan government was an agent of the U.S. government. How can you deny that?
This is so ridiculous.
You say it was brutal.
The guy is just...
And put a hand on your heart and say it was more brutal than the 90s Afghanistan or even now when Afghanistan is going to be.
Yes, I did a whole video. I did a 45-minute video on all the rape, all the all of the rape and torture and murder. You had Australia. You're an Australian, right? So you had Australian special forces who were hunting farmers, Afghan horses, and cutting off their fingers. No, this is a pattern of abuse.
They were punished.
They stopped.
I'm the sadist. I'm the sadist. This is his reaction to murder, rape, child molestation on a systematic scale, which has been documented. It's been documented. Despite the efforts of the U.S. and the UN to cover up their crimes, it's been documented. They stopped counting casualties. They stopped counting casualties in the number of innocent civilians that they were murdering in drone strikes and different night raids, all the weddings that they bombed, all the graduation ceremonies that they bombed. They stopped counting the innocent civilians. So this is a cover-up attempt by these countries, the coalition of countries that were attacking Afghanistan and occupying them for 20 years. But Harris has been living in a dream world, maybe that utopia that I showed you a picture of.
Punished.
Why were they even there? You just said that there was no presence. Now you're saying they were punished or isolated. So there were soldiers there, right? So why are you...
Yeah, so soldiers that are punished, these are just token low-level people that are punished. Usually they're punished and then they're they're punished, and then they're sorry guys, I'm blanking. They're pardoned. So that happened with Donald Trump, actually. He pardoned a bunch of these soldiers that were going around indiscriminately shooting, gunning down innocent civilians. They later get pardoned. It's just to quiet the media outrage, where people might start wondering, oh, are we the baddies? Are we the bad guys? No. We punish them. We punished these people, these bad soldiers. They were way out of line. Even though it was our generals that told them to terrorize the population and to bring them to heel, these bad soldiers, naughty soldiers. SubhanAllah, if you don't laugh, you cry, right?
Because no, I'm not changing my story.
You said that there was no forces in Afghanistan, right?
I'm saying no. I didn't say that. I said the government. I said the government was Afghanistan. I said the government was Afghanistan. The government was given back to Afghan people, and there was an attempt to democracy. Unfortunately, Islam got in the way, and it said, no, sorry, we want to live in the 7th century, and we want to be ruled by warlords, terror, intimidation, and fear, and executions, and barbarity, and democracy has no place in Afghanistan. You should be, everyone else, every sane person, not you, that would be an unexpected expectation from you. Not everyone would be happy in Afghanistan. We've seen the footages of people trying to escape Afghanistan. Why? Burqa sales have gone through the roof in Afghanistan. People are scared. Women came out and women were beaten up. Just yesterday there was a news story.
People are trying to escape El Salvador and Mexico. People are trying to escape all of these countries.
Let's let Harris finish his point, and I promise we'll come right back to you.
Yeah, what other reasons? Why? What other it's this, why are you saying that people escaping human rights El Salvador, human rights Mexico, human rights Peru, democracies, they're escaping for other reasons? Okay, what other reasons? Economic reasons, right? So why is it when they're leaving their countries, it's based on economics, but when these Afghans want to leave Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, it's because of Sharia, it's because of Islam, it's because of the Taliban, not economic reasons. That's the contradiction, and the whole point, like, that's one level of questioning. The second level of questioning is that, well, why in the first place aren't these countries, these human rights countries, prospering? That's the Botswana question. Why aren't they prospering like the U.S.? Why is there huge inequality, the structural inequality between the West and the rest? You haven't explained that. You keep deferring, or not deferring, but you keep avoiding that question.
Here's